Welcome to Talk Branding to Me, the podcast for women building intentional businesses and brands rooted in strategy, not just aesthetics.
Branding doesn't have to feel overwhelming. It's more than design. It's how strategy and style come together to create an identity, build trust, and stand out.
We're your hosts, Jamie Wright of Embellish Brands
and Jessie Ford of Untethered Design Studio.
We're brand strategists, designers, and friends who turned our coffee chats into honest conversations about branding done right
and wrong.
If you're feeling stuck or unsure about your brand, you're in the right place.
And now, let's talk branding.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Talk Branding to Me. My name is Jamie, and I am here with my co-host, Jessie. Today, we are talking about something that I think maybe not a lot of people completely think about. What is the difference between branding, marketing, advertising, and public relations? These terms get thrown around a lot. And, for those of us who are in one of those industries, we obviously have a pretty good idea. But for someone who's on the other side, who might be one of our clients or somebody who's brand new business owner or someone who's just not familiar with any of these activities, you may not be super clear on what they are, how they are potentially similar, maybe how they are different from each other. So that is what we are here to chat with you about today. And Jessie, I'm handing it over to you to kick us off.
Awesome. Okay, so I get this question sometimes, Jamie. I'm sure you've gotten it with clients. Branding and marketing. So the first two aspects that we'll kind of tackle here. What is the difference, right? And, we work through brand strategy, brand design with clients, and then we talk about marketing. And then they'll sometimes say, well, I thought the branding was the marketing, or isn't the marketing the branding? It's the same thing. So let's debunk that myth right now for everyone listening. There is a huge difference between branding and marketing. They are two very different sectors that, coexist simultaneously, of course, within the same industry space. However, they are different. Branding is the action-based part of the brand that you've created. Your brand is your identity, the identity of the business, and the branding is kind of the action-based components of the brand and how you sort of put it out into the world. Your brand is who you are, right? It's the identity. So when you're creating the brand, that is just the brand by itself, and it has to come first. You have to have an identity to work with. And then the marketing is what you do with the brand and how you promote it, how you put it out into the world, how you get it to talk about your brand and put your brand out there and get people familiar with it and get people building a relationship with it and trusting it and learning about it and hopefully taking action with connecting with it at some point and working with it. So your brand is who you are and it's the identity of the business, but the marketing is what you do with the branding. So the marketing could be things like posting on social media, running social media campaigns, email marketing, blogging, starting a YouTube channel, heck, traditional grassroots marketing, taking out a billboard, doing a commercial for TV, right? There are countless avenues of marketing and ways that you can market. If you're wondering what is the difference between having a brand and then marketing the brand, it's just taking the identity that you create for the business that people come to know and trust and then putting it to work for you. Marketing is how you actually take the brand and put it out into the world to be promoted.
I think when talking to my own clients and really trying to distinguish between the two, I'd probably say something very similar to you, Jessie, but it's the brand is who you are, what you do. It's all the pieces, it's all the parts that make up this identity, as you said, or make up your business or whatever the organization is. And marketing is telling the world about it. It's even like building brand awareness. We've talked about that in some of our episodes. And again, marketing is just letting people know who you are, what you do, how they can find you. It's showing up where they are at. So those social media channels, it's in the email. It's the action that you take to put your brand in all the places in the world. So it's very similar to what you said. I don't know if that analogy helps anyone think about it because they are kind of abstract in a way for those who aren't familiar.
Yeah. Well, to take it a step further too, with marketing, there are organic ways to market and there
Yeah.
are paid ways to market, right? So organic would be that grassroots, starting from scratch, sort of old school, building relationships, putting yourself out there, emailing people, posting on social media just from your own profiles without necessarily putting money into those efforts in terms of like you just kind of doing it yourself
So
versus
to clarify, organic means free. And when you hear it in terms of marketing, when we talk about organic, you're not paying to do those things or get that reach.
yes, thank you. And then, a paid form of marketing would be advertising, like when someone is running online ads on different websites or on social media. Do you want to explain what advertising is and how it's different from branding and marketing?
Yeah. So advertising is basically a form of marketing, but it's paid. You are putting money behind advertising channels or marketing channels to get in front of people. Obviously, one of the big ones that we know about are ads on social media, Google ads. Advertising is just simply a paid form of marketing, and it's using marketing channels of a variety of types. Like Jesse, you mentioned a billboard earlier. Billboards are still absolutely viable ways of marketing and advertising your business. So I completely agree there. But, signs on buses and an ad on a web page somewhere, all of those things are different marketing channels. And then when you put money behind it, that's where we classify it as advertising.
Hmm.
We also want to talk to you about public relations because when something gets a lot of publicity, we might hear the term public relations coming out, but then we also might hear brand awareness or just a variety of other terms, and they might be thrown around and used interchangeably. To kind of set the record straight today, public relations is the perception, the public's perception of your brand. Your personal brand, your business, whatever it is that you mean, it's the public's perception. So public relations, public perception. When I'm explaining this to others, I also throw in a secondary definition where it's also the act of influencing the
Mm,
public's perception of your brand. Often, public relations tends to be more visible when we see a crisis going on.
hmm.
There's actually a couple of them that are happening right now. I won't name specifics, but we are seeing statements that are coming out in the media. We are seeing people reading from papers and we are hearing things. That's really interesting. Why are they saying it that way? All of those actions and the language that's involved, that's a part of public relations because they are managing the public's perception of what is going on. And on the flip side, so not necessarily always needing a crisis in order to have public relations, but public relations also comes in the form of somebody showing up maybe on a local morning news segment to talk about their business or to demonstrate a product that they have. It's just, again, getting out there, building public awareness for what they have to offer, and again, relating to the public in that way. So I would argue maybe there's a little bit of a blend potentially between marketing and public relations, but it's if we kind of drill it down, it's the actions and the intent behind the thing that differentiates some of these terms from each other. So,
It's confusing to people at times, right?
mhm,
Because there is such an overlap of these similar pieces that all go into the same puzzle box, and all kind of fit
mhm,
together to really support a brand. Like, I do think it comes back to the brand identity, the foundation of the business, and the way that it is perceived and it is seen, and the reasons people feel about it the way that they do are dictated and controlled by the efforts made from advertising, from
mhm.
PR, from marketing. One kind of feeds into the other. Like, you establish the brand identity first, and then you do figure out a strategy around how you're going to market that brand and get it in front of people. Advertising is one way that you can do that, but you don't have to. You can take other, avenues. PR, it's kind of its own animal. This is coming from someone who has worked for PR firms. I very much lived the agency life for a long time, demanding, fast paced environment, quick turnarounds, managing multiple clients and projects. And I felt like we were always putting out fires. So there is such a unique need, I think, for PR. It's almost its own kind of specialized way of managing a brand. And I do consider it a marketing form as well because a lot of what goes into PR, yes, is handling a crisis for sure and kind of like being on the front lines and sort of advocating for and protecting the brand. Like that's what those PR professionals are there for. But it's also, like you said, publicizing a brand. I think it's the way that you publicly market to, in a
Hmm.
way. I know
Yeah.
marketing is probably all aspects of it can be considered public, but again, it's very niche, it's very specialized. So it is the way that you get your clients published and you get them speaking at events, and it's how you get them known in the media and in the world. So I think it takes marketing just a step further in the way it's publicly managed in the public eye, if that makes sense. Like it can very much be confusing, but hopefully that kind of distills each area down a little bit in a way that anyone listening can kind of understand, okay, they're all important and they all work together. And there's definitely a blend and an overlap, but just know that they're also different and they also stand on their own. To me, the most important thing to keep in mind is that your branding is separate. Like your brand is what you start with, and then you use marketing, advertising, PR to put it out there. So please know that is why your brand and branding is separate from the other entities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like how you framed that, Jesse, where, again, as with the theme of this podcast, we will die on the hill that branding is the foundation of your business. Just echoing that, as we say, branding is a mix of the strategy and the style. Once you have all of those elements of the brand identity put together, that's going to give you the information that you need to then build a marketing strategy, which may or may not include paid advertising, which may or may not also include a public relations campaign. So don't feel overwhelmed. It can be overwhelming, but you also don't need to do it all either. You can find what works best for you. And you might find that at different stages of your business, maybe you've got launch phases, then you have maybe rest phases, depending on what's actually going on and what your offers are and the life cycle that you're in. You might need one or more or none of them, just based on whatever it is that you have going on. So just being aware of what the difference is, then that can help you make some decisions about the particular strategies that you and your team might be working on. Also, from a budgeting perspective, putting some money away or allocating line items in your budget to support some of these particular efforts because you know it's part of the strategy that you got to roll out in the near future. So it's going to take a little bit of planning. So once you understand all of these parts and you figure out what would work best for your business, then put some intention into when to use each of these tactics because really there's no quick fix. I hope you know this by now. There is no quick fix for your branding strategy, your marketing strategy, your advertising, your public relations. Everything takes time. And anybody who promises you quick results, will probably cost you in some way to get those quick results. But more importantly, I don't know that the quick result may necessarily exist or come to fruition in some way. So just exercise some caution there. But then with that, you want to just keep all of these pieces of the pie in mind. I'm going to give a little analogy here. Jesse, there's some bakers, and I can't remember the name of one off the top of my head. I know I've seen them where they specialize in selling you a pie that's actually made up of different types of pie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen those. I've always thought this so I'm like, cool, bang for your buck, right? But that's kind of the visual idea here is as you are building out your strategies and building brand awareness, what do each of those pieces of your brand awareness pie look like? How much of the pie is going to be your marketing? How much of it is going to be advertising? And then obviously with advertising comes a budget, right? And how much of that pie is going to be your public relations campaign if needed? And maybe some of those don't even need to be in the pie at all. So definitely be thoughtful about how you are building this particular strategy, how you are utilizing the different pieces. Bring in experts if you're unsure. There are no shortage of people who are working professionals who are very experienced in each of these areas. To reach out, ask for advice, and they can help you figure out what makes the most sense for your brand. And as always, just because I'm me, just proceed with caution. Make sure that as you are reaching out to people, that you have a good rapport with them, that you are choosing somebody who is collaborative, who is going to be representing the best interests of your brand. Again, not somebody who is promising quick fixes or very specific outcomes. Because I have come to find in my own experience, while we might have a good idea of where we might land, things still do happen sometimes that take us off course and we have to readjust. So somebody who is promising a very specific outcome, that's somebody that I would tend to approach with caution. Also, if you are planning on DIYing some of this stuff yourself, just be aware of buying into formulas or strategies or workbooks or plans that someone else has created, because it may or may not work for your particular brand and the specific mix that your brand needs to be successful.
Mhm. And I think trust comes into play, right? We always talk about building a brand and the trust that comes with it. Let's say you are an agency or you own an agency or you're a business that does offer some kind of PR services. Or let's say you are an attorney or you're an accountant. Like, no matter what business you're in, this is where it all comes back to having trust with that client. And especially in a PR space, the client working with anyone who's going to manage or promote their brand or talk about it or put it out there publicly in any way has to be trusted, right? And so that person providing the services has to have that connection and have that transparency with a client. And I think it just all comes back to the root of branding, no matter who you are, where you are, what you're doing, what you're promoting, not promoting. Just make sure that there's always trust in the relationships and the partnerships that surround your brand, especially if you are working with an agency that offers services like we're talking about today, because you do have individuals who you could work with someone like you or I who offers branding services, right? Independently. And then you might go to someone who just does email marketing or just does social media marketing or does advertising. And those are all, again, their own animals. Or you might be a brand that does need to sort of be in the public eye and be known in the media. So you might invest in working with someone who is specialized in PR. Or you might just want a one-stop shop altogether. And this is where brands often, of course, go ahead and make that investment, regardless of what kind of contract it might look like. If it's like 3 months, 6 months, a year, they go ahead and hire an agency, much like who I've used to work for in the past, who does it all for you. You have to put a lot of trust into any service providers that you're working with, especially when they're handling your baby, right? That is your brand. So I would just
Yeah,
add that.
I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, agencies I think are really helpful from a one-stop shop standpoint. You often do find the breadth of services that if you're in the market for quite a few services, then an agency definitely is potential way to go because they have all of that under one roof normally. Well, Jesse, do you have any final thoughts on this topic before we begin our transition into the next segment?
I don't think so. I think I have some more to say in the segment that we're getting ready to talk about. So I'll probably leave everyone with those thoughts.
Okay, then, with that being said, we are now at the end of our episode where we start to wrap up. But before we officially wrap up, we will sound off on something a little bit deeper in our segment called Talk Branding to Me, where one of us asks the other to share thoughts, ideas, opinions on some topic related to branding. So, Jesse, talk branding to me.
As I mentioned earlier, I very much come from the agency world. I definitely got my start in more corporate in-house art departments for a couple of different organizations, but then I transitioned to working for an agency and I worked for a couple of different ones before I worked for the third one that I ended up leaving on good terms, of course, to pursue my business full time and launch Untethered full time. And I had a lot of support for that from the woman who ran the agency that I worked for because she understood the dream of launching a business. And her agency is where I really got a front row seat to how all of this works. everything that we're talking about. I was able to be in a space where it was collaborative. It was not micromanaged. We all jumped in and worked together on things. I was a designer and eventually an art director before I left. What I loved was just the team effort that was made in taking care of our clients. So, yes, we offered branding, we offered different types of marketing, advertising being one of them, and definitely offered PR because that was something that my boss was very well versed in, PR pro to the core, and something she was very good at, handling media, that type of thing. So, I just look back on that experience very positively. And we worked with amazing clients and we got to do really fun projects. Being in it then, and now being a few years removed, being 10 years removed actually from it, and having this conversation with you today, it really brings everything full circle because I can look back and see, yeah, the importance of each of these things and how they are similar, but they're different. And you approach each one intentionally and with a different type of purpose from the others. Like they all serve a purpose and have a time and place in promoting a brand. But again, I think the best example would be you can have a brand, you can market it, but you can market it in ways that doesn't necessarily include advertising or doesn't include PR. And then you have some brands who operate solely off of advertising, print, online, whatever it is. And who operate off of just the reputation that's sort of built for them in the public eye and in the media, and that's where they really rely on the PR efforts. So, I just look back and it's able to drive home for me how there is the overlap, how there are the similarities, but how each service area is also unique and serves a purpose in building a brand. And I would still probably go as far as to group marketing, advertising, PR sort of over here together and leave branding over here on its own. Because at the end of the day, and this is something I hope our listeners will take home with them, you have to have the brand first. You have to have the foundation. You have to have the identity. Then it makes it easier to come up with a strategy that you can implement through the different pathways of marketing, of advertising, of PR. So always make sure that you're really clear on who you are as a brand first before and where you want to be and how you want to show up. And come up with that strategy first before you jump into, I need to do all this marketing. I need to do this type of advertising. I need to work with a PR specialist on this. I think if you even work with a brand strategist up front, someone like us even, we're able to give direction and guidance and support around how you take this brand, and this foundation we've built and how you put it out into the world because you can do it in multiple ways.
Just out of curiosity, Jesse, thinking back on your agency background and how you got to see these parts either intertwine or not, depending on the needs of the client. I'm asking because I'm very curious about this, and hopefully our listeners will be too. If you think back, was there a pattern to the types of businesses that may have, either by necessity or by choice, have utilized those different aspects? Where I'm going with this is I think I've seen patterns between service-based businesses versus product-based businesses versus brands of people. And depending on what type of brand it might be, you might lean more into certain aspects of marketing or advertising PR based on the type. Would you agree with that? Or what did you notice?
100%. So the types of clients, it was a multitude of industries served. It definitely was not just one type of client base with this last agency that I was with. But I can tell you specifically, we worked with a lot of big farms, restaurant groups, foodie type clients, dairy farmers, poultry farmers that were supplying your major retailers who were then supplying big restaurant brands. I would consider it the food and agriculture industry kind of in general. So a lot of our clients were livestock commodity groups funded by the state. Anytime there was a recall for a product, if there was an issue at a farm, if there was a fire, if there were animals contracting some kind of illness and it was immediately in the news the next day, that's where I saw fires getting put out. That's where I saw my boss and the women I worked with really jump into action and go manage those brands carefully, what they were posting on social media, what they were saying in the news, setting up interviews for them. to keep everything clean and neat and tidy, right? So that a reputation that had been built through generations and years wasn't just imploded overnight. You can imagine anything involving food, anything involving animals, people completely freak out, and rightfully so. And they just don't know what they don't know. So I think our agency was really good with educating the public and being able to counsel the clients on, hey guys, here's what you say, here's how you say it. Being honest, being authentic, but just doing some damage control. Like, let's not let the world freak out over this. We can explain this is what happened, this is why it happened, and these are the steps that we're taking to fix it. I think a lot of times I learned we would advise clients on just how to take ownership of and kind of agency over what was going on. And a lot of times the public and just people in general, they respect and understand that more than if you just sit there quietly, act like it didn't happen, put your head in the sand and don't say anything at all. So yeah, I think that specific client base that we served in the food and farming industry is a perfect example of when PR efforts are needed. Probably sometimes more often than not. But when issues arise or a crisis happens, that's when you have a good agency that can jump in and take care of it for you. And things always get
Mhm.
taken care of and stuff blows over. And you know what? In the fleeting world that we live in now, people are on to the next thing the next day. They're freaking out about something else in the news 2 days later. But in that moment when something happens, it is scary for the client because that is their reputation and their brand awareness and everything on the line. So, providing guidance and support around that is definitely when you see PR professionals really kick it into gear and do a really, really cool job. And I would provide any design efforts needed around that management without being necessarily on the front lines myself doing it. But I got to really see the amazing people that I worked with handling it with grace and class and professionalism. And that's the beauty of PR when you see it working in real time and then you see the results that come
Mhm.
after when a mess is cleaned up or a fire is put out and the client is so grateful um, that they have you as a support system.
I'm glad you brought this up today because now I'm thinking in my own head, and a lot of my marketing work that I have done in the past has also included encouraging my clients to have a crisis response plan and pre writing some scripts, having some templates set up. As we've said in another episode, it's not a matter of if, but when. Some things will just happen in your business, and having a crisis communication strategy is something that I've advised marketing clients to just have it on hand because you never know when something is going to pop up. And when it does, you need to be able to respond quickly instead of spinning your wheels, taking time because silence usually is interpreted, a certain way by the public. And I've always been fascinated by crisis response because I think there is a science and an art form to it. Crisis response is a very specific aspect of public relations. I think that's more frequently where we do see public relations at large coming out from the background and into the forefront of whatever it is that's going on. For those of you who are listening, think about that too. It's not even just necessarily even as we've discussed just getting your brand out there in front of people and let them know about it, but it's also even having that backup plan of if you know what hits the fan, how quickly are you able to pull together a team? How quickly are you able to activate a plan to protect the brand and manage the narrative around your brand and whatever that particular scenario is so that you can hopefully come out the other side as unscathed as possible. So just wanted to piggyback on your thoughts with that one because I look at things from a measure of protection usually, and I had forgotten about crisis communications being a backup strategy. Just
Yeah.
tuck it away for when you might
Yeah,
need it.
absolutely. And one more just quick thought while we're here. I think that more businesses need to consider PR as a strategy because, you can create the brand, you can market it, you can advertise. But if you're a brand that would benefit from being in the news, in the media, like in a good way, being advertised in, or I guess more so promoted in publications, speaking at events, being interviewed, which kind of positions you as a thought leader. Benefits like that come when you do work with someone who is specialized in public relations. So it might be just another strategy, another avenue to consider exploring more in your business. And I think someone specialized in that area just can take it a step further and might be a little bit more knowledgeable and obviously have the right connections that someone doing other general forms of marketing might not quite be able to do. So again, it's just, like I said, it's its own animal, but it might be a service area that you should consider throwing some dollars at and investing in a little bit more if you want your brand to be put out there more in the public eye.
That is a great point to wrap up on today, Jesse. We hope you enjoyed this episode where we talked about the difference between branding, marketing, advertising, and public relations. And then also just our little side journey that we took to dive a little bit deeper into the world of PR and how that could benefit your business. So, with that, we are going to wrap today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you again soon.
Thanks for listening to Talk Branding to Me. If today's conversation sparked a new way of thinking about your brand, we'd love for you to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with a fellow business owner who's ready to think deeper about branding and have fun with it too.
For more branding insights, behind the scenes conversations, and resources to support your brand journey, connect with us at Embellish Brands and at Untethered Design on social media.
Don't forget, branding is more than just aesthetics. It's both strategy and style.
Until next time, remember, you're fully capable of building a brand you're proud of, and we're here cheering you on every step of the way.